financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam.
Hi, it's Francis. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching this video. If you're catching us on YouTube, please help us help others by clicking like, subscribe, and all notifications so you don't miss any videos. And check back for the next video. I think you're going to love it. Thanks again. For more information, you can visit us at hugyourmoney.com.
Welcome to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam. Hi.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I am good, and we have another guest this week.
We have a great guest this week, and I'm really grateful to him for coming on with all that's going on politically right now. I did give him an out. You know, if you're too busy, you don't want to do this, I understand. We've got a lot of political fire, if you will, pardon that pun, going on right now. But to his credit, given his work ethic and the kind of guy that he is, he said, oh, no, I'll do it. So,
well, this is probably the friendliest interview of the week, right?
Maybe, could be, right? I hope so. We'll see. We'll ask him some tough things. But anyway, I'd like to welcome Senator Michael D. Brown from Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. Well, first of all, welcome, but I'm going to ask you for a little history lesson, but welcome to Financial Fitness.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here with you ladies, and you know, I'm a politician, so I always like to talk. I mean, that's what we're about.
Well, we're going to let you do plenty of it, but I have to start by saying, give us a little history lesson. Why are you a shadow senator in Washington, D.C., and not, why don't we have federal representation in Congress?
Because when the country was formed, you have to remember democracy was an experiment. You know, they really didn't know how this was going to go. So there was a meeting of Congress in Philadelphia at Carpenter's Hall, which is where they met. They met periodically in different cities, Baltimore, Annapolis, Philadelphia. And a bunch of veterans from the Revolutionary War surrounded Congress with torches and threatened them because they hadn't been paid. So Congress escaped to New Jersey. And I grew up in New Jersey. I can tell you that's very scary. They snuck to New Jersey. And when they came to Washington, decided to make the capital Washington, Madison said, we must have control over the jurisdiction which we occupy. Because they were afraid if they didn't, that the local government could take control of Congress. So this is an anachronism, basically, that goes back over 200 years. Now, the issue today is what it always is in bringing new people into Congress, and that's control of Congress. Republicans don't want two more Democratic senators in the United States Senate. So they've stood firmly against every bill that we put in to become a state, which would make us equal. All states enter the union on equal footing. And right now, we've passed a bill in the House of Representatives twice for statehood, only with Democratic sponsors. No Republican has ever voted for it. It's now in the Senate, but we need 60 votes in the Senate, and we don't have 60 Democrats in the Senate. So there's only one or two things we can do. We can either get 60 votes in the Senate, or we can get we can suspend the filibuster, which is what makes us have 60 votes. If we suspend the filibuster, all we need is 51 votes, so we probably have that. But the Republicans, again, are feeling the heat, so they just introduced legislation that would permanently end my office. It would permanently eliminate my office. And it's likely that it's going to pass. So unfortunately, I'm probably going to be the last one of these guys.
Well, boy, you've been doing this since 2007, I think, for 17 years.
18 years. I'll be at the end of my third 6-year term in January. Yes. And I didn't run for re-election. I mean, some of us saw this stuff coming. So,
but let me just say, because, you know, we do talk about money a lot on the show, and one of the things about finance is that it's inextricably linked to our lives. And I say this all the time. You know, when Jess and I talk about guests, we could literally have anybody as a guest because we all have to deal with money. So part of your complaint here, part of why your fight for the citizens of DC is that you don't have any representation. So things like financial matters, budgets, things like that, you don't have the same control. Is that correct?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. And you know what? The president of the United States signs two budgets. He signs our budget and the federal budget. Only jurisdiction which requires us, the Senate, Congress, and the president to sign off on our budget, and they can do whatever they want with that. And actually, they use the budget against us constantly. And that's why these what we call riders, which they put on the appropriations bill, will pass, because the appropriations bill for the District of Columbia is $22 billion. And so the only way we could get these riders off would be to interrupt the $22 billion that's coming to the District of Columbia, and nobody's really willing to do that. And
that's why people put riders on there, right? To be able to get some of these things passed that wouldn't otherwise normally pass.
Yeah, very often that's why they put them on. Yeah, they're supposed to be put on because, you know, you've looked at the legislation and you think the legislation's solid, but you have an amendment you want to make. And sometimes the amendments come off. Sometimes the riders come off, but I don't think it's going to happen in this case. You know,
So
$2 billion is a lot of money.
yeah, it's very interesting. You work with the mayor and council, right? But walk us through a typical day, because you don't have the same life as a traditional senator. Can you explain what's different for people who are listening?
Well, you know, my job is basically to be a complainer about this, to go lobby Congress, to try to make people aware of the situation. Because we did a survey in the 1980s that said or 1990s, that said 80% of America believes we have exactly the same rates that every other American has. Because why wouldn't you, right? It's counterproductive to think that the citadel of democracy, you know, the place where we have our government, has no voice. I often say it's like telling people in Detroit they can't drive cars, or people in Hollywood they can't go to the movies. You know, we're the people that make national policy, but, you know, we have no voice. So this is why I have a podcast, and this is why I started it, because we wanted to get the word out. We wanted to inform America. So I have a website called Teach Democracy, and I have this, and I go out and lecture, and I travel. I've been to 17 states. In fact, talking about this. In fact, I just came back from Nebraska recently, where I spoke before the Senate in Nebraska, because they had a resolution to support our effort. So I spoke to that, but it died in the Senate. But I went and testified for it.
Is your website teachdemocracy.org? How do people find you?
Yeah, and my show's on it's called Shadow Politics, but yeah, teachdemocracy.org.
You've shared with me that you haven't pulled a paycheck for this job. So you've had a podcast for 11 years, and you haven't gotten a paycheck for being a senator for this whole term, 15 years, 17 years, whatever.
15 years, because I shut my business down 3 years into it. But you know what? I learned a long time ago that it really doesn't, it's really not about how much money you have. It's about how you live.
That's right.
I'm not sure that I had the idea that I would never get a paycheck again, but I really didn't care. I don't have a beach house or a boat, but you know, I live in $1 million house. Which I own. You know, like I said, my kids all went through college. We've had a good life, and of course, my wife's added to that. She has a good job.
No one will believe that, but we say that all the time. It sounds like a cliche. It isn't what you make, it's what you keep. But really, if you live below your means for long enough, that situation of being paycheck to paycheck reverses itself. And you did have a business where you made a lot of money, president and the founder of Horizon Communications, is that right?
That's right. And
Direct mail, yeah.
I set myself up because, the mantra over my desk, I had this thing that said, in the long run, we are all dead. And that's the mantra of small business, right? We always
Cheery.
want to make it to the next week. We always want to make it to the next month. We're not planning what we're going to do in 5 years. So I try to set myself up to make that comfortable. We put 50% down on my house. So I live in $1 million. Actually, the house was just appraised at $1.5 million. And until last year, when I took a little money out, for 25 years, my mortgage payment was $750 a month.
Wow.
And and that's how I did it. I made sure that my expenditures never exceeded the money that I had available to work.
Do you have any tips for getting there where you can actually just pursue your passion with a job without having to worry about a paycheck? Also, the other thing I'm curious about, because I always hear from stories on like Bill Gates or very rich people that they don't drive fancy cars. They'll drive like a Civic or, just a regular car. What kind of car do you have? I want to know.
I'm a boy from New Jersey, so I drive a muscle car. I
Of course.
I have a Dodge Charger.
The Jersey
Whoa.
Shore.
Dodge Charger and a Harley Davidson.
Nice.
All right.
I have the Harley because I was so broke when I was a kid. And I was an orphan, so I didn't have anybody to sign on to my car insurance. So at 16, they laughed at me and they said, "Oh yes, an unattached 16-year-old boy. Yeah, your car insurance will be more than 3 times what a car payment would be."
Yeah.
So
Right.
I was lamenting that, and some kid walked up to me in school and said, "Oh, there's a place downtown called Person's H&O, and they'll insure any motorcycle for $95 a year." And I said,
Ooh.
so I got a motorcycle, but yeah, I think it helps. I'm sorry to say this, but I think it helps to be broke when you grow up, because then you realize how little you really need to get by. I think a lot of us worry about things that we don't need to worry about. And the car is the perfect example. Mercedes, the top of the line Mercedes-Benz doesn't get you there any quicker than a Prius does. And it's really not, maybe if you've got the money to do it, it's nice and you want to do it, but it's not what you really need. You gotta, there's a great line in the Sheryl Crow song, which is, "It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you have."
That's
And
right.
and I think that's really important.
Yeah, I know that line too. You've touched on a perfect point, and we'll go to break in a minute, but and I want to come back and ask you about being a dad and talk a little bit about what's going on politically and get some fatherly lessons from you. But you give good advice there, and we certainly want to hear more of it when we come back.
Okay.
All right. Let me get your phone number, Dr. Francis.
Sure, it's 413-773-3333.
And you can go to hugyourmoney.com. We'll be right back with much more. Part 2 of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram, right here on WHMP.
Feel like you're spinning your wheels? Get a fresh start and professional guidance. Schedule your free consultation with a Hug financial coach today. Hug Your Money. So unique, it's patented.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram. Hi.
Hey, Jess, we're back. We're back with Senator Brown from Washington, D.C., and because he's willing to talk to us about his opinions, and he's, as self-described, an open book, and because I'm really particularly interested in getting this word out to our listeners and viewers, I want to ask you about inflation. We're talking about politics, and inflation is on the tip of everybody's tongue. Can you talk a little bit about how inflation works? Like, is the current president to blame? Is the last president to blame? What kind of lag time is there? What do you see going forward? Just give us your thoughts on inflation, please.
Well, I think right now it's hard to determine that, to answer that question, because of the pandemic. The pandemic interfered with our economy. There were great interferences in blockchain and getting things done, and prices. it's funny that prices always seem to go up, and it's much harder to bring them down, right? You're talking to a guy that started out as a teenager supporting himself and used to pump gas for 28 cents a gallon. So, sometimes I find myself driving ridiculous distances to save 2 cents a gallon on gas. And then I realize I've just spent $1.50 saving 60 cents. But for most people, first of all, inflation is the cost of gas and the cost of bread.
Yeah.
So right now, when the president, for example, is out there talking about the economic developments that have been made, there have been several boosts to the economy over the last 6 months, right? Inflation is coming down slowly but surely. Unemployment is down. People are basically doing better. People don't see that, we don't have, the average American doesn't have money in a 401k. They're not looking at the stock market. They really don't care. The stock market, I started investing in the stock market 40 years ago, and the Dow Jones was, I think, a few thousand, and now it's up to almost 40,000. I mean, it's really, really, really grown, but that's not the economy to most people. Inflation is all they care about. The cost of housing, the cost of bread, the cost of gas. And I think it's very difficult to bring those things down because, we know in a capitalist society, it's all about supply and demand. And that's why we have big problems with monopolies, right? Because they can control the supply. And competition is what makes the economy work. So my biggest worry about the economy, I can tell you, is that there are people like Amazon and Walmart that are taking over the economy. I think that's problematic in the long run. But
As we're doing this show during Prime Days.
Yeah, during Prime Days, my wife's up there making a list right now of what of the things you're going to buy. It seems to me that supply and demand has been interfered with in the past generation or so. We're all about buying on credit and not that you shouldn't, it certainly has its place. But I think we get overextended. I think when things start going bad, they can go bad very quickly for people, and I think that's a problem. Now, who's to blame for that? I don't think the president's to blame because it's really up to Congress to make policy and economic policy as well. So, you'll have Republicans standing up there right now talking about how what Biden's doing is hurting the economy. But it's really the Republicans in Congress who have stood in the way of a lot of things, just to be honest about it. And they play both ends against the middle. And so, yeah, whatever president, that's traditionally the case too, is that who's ever in the White House, the other party loses in an off-year election because they take a lot of blame for stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And I think people don't recognize that lag time. People have to realize this, you get handed, you only have 4 years to do this. You get handed whatever the last president left behind, and you either benefit from that or you dig your way out of it. And in this case, where we had COVID, we gave away a lot of free money to people to try to keep this country afloat. And now people have just completely forgotten that conveniently, like, oh, well, so that money was given away. I mean, we'll just print more. But when we talk about inflation, it's really a hot topic. And I don't like that politicians use it against each other as a weapon, because you're absolutely right. Congress is in charge of this. It's not whoever's in the White House, whichever candidate it might be.
Well, the president's priority, what his job is to set the agenda. That's his priority. That's what he can do. And Congress can either take it or not take it. I mean, they don't have to follow his lead, especially if he doesn't lead Congress. And, as liberal Democrats, we're paralyzed right now at the idea that former President Trump may win, and they might take they already have the Supreme Court. They might take Congress, both House and Senate, and that would again, like competition works in the economy, the balance of power really has to be intact for the government to work properly. It can't work properly if one party controls everything.
I've never seen the country so divided. In my lifetime, I've never experienced an election either with two incumbent presidents or where I felt fearful, actually fearful of some sort of retaliation. And I was in a parking lot the other day and a truck went by and it had an F Biden flag in the back. And my initial reaction was, I'd like to go and talk to that person and say, I bet your mother's really proud of you. You know, this is not how we do it in America. We say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to vote, right? But I immediately had almost a visceral response. You can't go and do that because this person could be dangerous. Their job is to provoke me. Their job right now, that guy's job was to be provocative. And there are things on the other side as well. And I just really dislike what's going on about the two sides scrapping with one another when it seems like there's almost no concern about the truth. You know, if this pitch doesn't work, I just pivot and I say this now. So I'm going to ask you for this is the question finally. I'm going to ask you for your immediate response when you saw former President Trump get shot in the ear and go down and come up again. And pump his fist and say, fight.
At first I was horrified. I think like next I realized, because I'm a politician, that President Trump couldn't have handled the situation better as a politician by standing up and being defiant and acting strong. I was like, he did this photo of him with blood on his face and his fist in the air, that's going to last forever, and it's going to go on and on. It's going to be one of those images that's burned into our brain. And then, ultimately, when I started to really consider it, I thought, oh my God, what an amazing twist of fate it was that he turned his head at the last minute and that bullet grazed him. He probably came closer to being killed than as close as you could possibly come to being killed. And I don't know if I'm not sure that I would accredit it to divine intervention, but one way or the other, I thought it was a really scary thing. And we're around this stuff all the time. I knew the police officer that was killed with Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan was attacked, because his job was to be at the Hilton and scan and for politicians. And when I worked for Jimmy Carter, he did the same thing for Jimmy Carter they did for Ronald Reagan. So we knew some of these people. James Brady was somebody that we were familiar with in Washington, and he was critically injured in that attack. And certainly one of my earliest childhood memories, I remember putting a scrapbook together when I was a kid about I still have it, about the assassination of President Kennedy. All the stuff that was in the paper. And I remember women openly weeping in the grocery store. I think I was in third grade at the time. People were just horrified by that. And that's the thing that really bothers me. What you're saying is that that was something that was a rare exception, and now it seems to be more of the rule than an exception. If you think of all the people that have been attacked, Gabby Giffords, Steve Scalise, it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, right? Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford was attacked. The list goes on. And it's really scary that that's become part of our narrative. But, again, I got to also say, for years, we've been trying to ban assault rifles and other things. And because the NRA is really a trade association that wants to sell more guns, they've been able to stand in our way by contributing massive amounts to Republican campaigns and telling Democrats who don't support them that they will campaign against them. I have a friend, a guy I work with, Mark Warner, who's a senator from from Virginia. And for years, we couldn't get him to sign onto our bill because the NRA threatened if he did, because they don't want senators Democratic senators in that. They threatened him if he did that they would campaign against him and they would give money to his opponent. And, finally he came around. But this is a fear, that you want to reform American politics, get the money out of it. If you could get the money out of politics, you would go a long way. Two things, that and give Congressmen a 4-year term instead of a 2-year term, because the day after they get elected, they start raising money for the next election.
Yeah.
So it's always out there pandering, and it's just not a good situation to put them in.
Yeah, it really is ripe for graft and power.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and we see a lot of that in politics too, don't we?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, well, okay. So we're running a little bit short of time, but I want to ask you, because you're the father of 3 adult children. Yeah. So we recently did a Father's Day show about fatherly lessons, and we're talking to a politician who's spent, 17 years working at something mostly without pay. What would you give for advice, or what would you hope for your kids and the next generation about American politics?
Well, first, let me say that as I retire in January, I'm going to become a relentless lobbyist for grandchildren. None of my kids are cooperating in this regard. But I would say, give your kids good values and teach them good lessons, because, that's what you've got. You worry about. My oldest daughter's 31 years old. You worry about them their whole lives. It doesn't change at all. But what you have to do is you have to make them as solid as you can, and then send them out in the world and hope the best for them. And I think setting standards, my wife, all my kids have college educations, all 3 of them. My wife was a valedictorian of her high school, and she and I both have graduate degrees. And, we never looked at education like it was an option. I think that's what you have to do. And then you have to have faith in what you've done,
Yeah. Well, congratulations on getting 3 kids into good adulthood. That's a feat in itself.
So far, so good. I got my fingers crossed,
Yeah, and I hope things work out for you in DC. It doesn't seem fair that they don't have federal power there, so federal vote. We could talk forever about this stuff. If you might be interested in coming back another time.
Oh, always. I mean, I think it's delightful, and I think your show is important.
Thank you so much. You're a lovely guest, and I'd love to have you back again. So Senator Michael D. Brown from Washington, D.C., thank you for being
Dr. Ram, it was my pleasure to be on the show, and I hope you'll be on my podcast sometime.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you.
Talk some more. And
thank you.
If you give us an expert opinion on money rather than my a thumbnail sketch.
All right, before we go, let me get your phone number.
Sure, it's 413-773-3333. And your website, Senator Brown?
bbsradio.com. You can find the show. We archive 6 years of shows, I think, so you can listen to the people I've interviewed over the years, or you can go to teachdemocracy.org. And that's really set up for students. We're trying to teach kids lessons about how America was formed and how important it is to be involved.
Great. Thank you.
Go vote. If I have to give any advice, go vote. I don't care.
Please vote. Whoever you vote for, just please vote.
Please vote.
All right. Thank you both very much. We will be back next week with another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Ram, right here on WHMP.
Seeking true financial freedom. Your Hug financial coach can help. Hug Your Money. So unique, it's patented.